Hello, I'm Pat Archibald. I'm a textile artist based in Edinburgh. I do a lot of teaching at my studio in Edinburgh, but I also have the privilege of travelling worldwide to teach, and when I'm away I go on lots of adventures that inspire the quilts that I make. You can see a couple behind me inspired by my travels throughout Ghana. Now, when I'm teaching my courses in Edinburgh, I call them creative journey courses, and I have a large number of students that come to be with me. And we usually have a common starting point for the course. So it might be a word, it might be a phrase, it might be a poem. And we start at this common point, and I direct a few sessions with the students and do a lot of design exercises with them that I'm going to talk to you about in just a minute. But I have no idea where each and every individual student is going to end up at the end of the year. They will end up with a piece of absolutely unique textile art that will celebrate their uniqueness and their take on the topic. So in recent years, topics might have been the word freedom, they might have been the word reflection, crossing borders, or perhaps a poem by George Mackay Brown, one of my favourite wordsmiths. However, this year decided to do something quite different. So I decided to introduce my students to a warehouse of tribal art called the Nomads tent, and this is run by Andrew Houghton in the city of Edinburgh. So I took my students there, and I have to say it is just an absolute visual and complete sensory overload when you enter the shop. The aim was for each student to spend the day having a good look throughout the shop and select a textile piece or an artefact that they felt they had a connection with, and they would use this as a starting point for their work. So let's have a quick visit to the Nomads tent so that you can get an idea of the wonderful experience that the students had on that first day. So you've had a wee look inside the Nomads tent, and you've seen what a wealth of inspiration there is there, and you can see that the students were probably spoilt for choice and what they would actually select to be their object that would start them off on their creative journey. So each student picked something and went away to have a think about it. And there was a few things I wanted them to do before we met the next time at the studio. I really wanted them to think laterally about the object that they had chosen. And I wanted them to consider things like, where was their object made? Would it have been, which country would it have been made in? What tribe might have made it? Would it be made in a workplace? Would it have been crafted at home? Who made their object? Was it an individual? Was it a group? Perhaps it was a cooperative. And would the maker have served an apprenticeship? What would the working environment be like? And maybe think about the design process that craftsperson had gone through. Patterns might be handed down through families. Was it a more contemporary approach that was taken to the crafting of this object? Was it freeform? Was it planned? And maybe also consider what tools the craftsperson might have used. What raw materials were selected as well? Were they available locally or did they have to be imported? What impact would these raw materials have had on the environment, perhaps even the health of the workers? Also having a good look at the artefact, and is there any symbolism in the patterning that's been used? Are the colours in the artefact significant? Are there natural or chemical dyes used? Are there any component parts in this particular piece that have been recycled or perhaps will be recycled? So I wanted to kind of scope out their areas of research before they came back to the class, so that they had a little bit more wealth of information that would lend itself then to how they explored their topic. So let me now lead you through some of the design exercises that we did over the first few sessions, primarily concentrating on pattern and colour and shape and form. So I said I would introduce you to some of the ideas of patterning and design, and a process that I led students through on those very first few sessions. I'm going to relate the design topics that I'm going to share with you to the lovely piece of jewellery that I bought at the Nomads tent. It's a gorgeous piece of German silver, and it showcases the peacock of India, and some lovely floral motifs, some scroll work down here, lovely little dots around the border, and some free-form feathers just hanging from the bottom of the pendant. Now, one of the first things that I did was to take an image of the necklace and just to blow it up to a size where I could really examine the patterning. And I'm going to go on from here and select elements of the pattern out of there to produce some linear designs. So not according to the format you see them there at all, but putting them into some kind of linear design. Proportions of the scroll work and the flowers are not necessarily in the same proportions that you see them in the pendant, but this is all just experimenting. And what if I go on then and take just a Sharpie or a fine liner and start to colour those elements in, and that gives a different dimension to the design work altogether. Now, from creating a linear design, perhaps we could go on and think about a radiating design, particularly some of the elements within my pendant take a circular format. So here's one where I've taken that lovely floral emblem, placed it in the centre, and taking some of those other flowers and hearts and circles and dots that I've seen within the pendant and arranged them in this lovely burst of design that comes out from the centre there. And again, just going to black, white and grey, starting to colour that in so that you start to observe that some elements of the design are coming towards you and some elements of the design are being pushed away. And perhaps we could take this into colour. So test that out with an analogous colour scheme or a side-by-side colour scheme, colours that are very closely related to each other on the colour wheel. Let's dip into another colour scheme. So this is a triadic colour scheme, and this time these are colours that are on the colour wheel that are equidistant to each other, form a triangle if you were to join them up by lines. And again, that just gives a completely different look. What if I go back to that photocopy that I took and chop that up into squares? And what if I rearrange those squares of chopped up photocopy and perhaps I get something like this? And here we start to get a sense of different depths to the design as we've rearranged the light and the dark areas of the pendant. And what if I then put a bit of tracing paper on top of that and just trace off the main elements of the design so I get a much clearer idea of the design there. Let's put that on a white paper and you'll see exactly how that looks now. Maybe I want to go on and explore that further in colour and fabric. Maybe I don't want to take the whole design. Maybe I just want to focus on a square, or perhaps 4 squares that run together, or perhaps even give it a linear quality and select 4 vertical or horizontal squares and work with them. Now, what if I take that same photocopy, well, in this case 2 photocopies, and chop them up into varying widths. Chop your first one vertically, your second one horizontally, weave them together, and hey, something completely different again.
And again, different lights and darks coming through. In this case, we've changed the positioning of the feathers. I've moved them up to the top of the design, and I'm getting a lovely curvy linear design there. Again, what if I take a bit of tracing paper and pop that over and trace the main elements of the design? Again, if I put a bit of white paper behind that, you'll start to see how that changes the design completely. That's giving me a completely different quality. I'm actually loving this one a lot because I'm getting much more a sort of necklace quality to this particular design here, a nice flow of shape coming through. And perhaps it's this one that I will take on into a finished piece in fabric. Now, this is exactly what the students did for those first few sessions, just to immerse themselves in the design process and the creativity. And after this, the students moved on to develop their own design work intuitively, but according to principles of design. And they came up with their own very unique pieces.
So you now have a little inkling about how I have explored pattern in relationship to that lovely piece of jewellery that I purchased at the Nomads tent. And I truly believe that you can create amazing pattern and design from absolutely anything. It's maybe just a little bit of hard work and thinking around your subject and how to rearrange things so that you produce something that is absolutely unique. And this is exactly what the students did. They explored pattern and colour in relationship to the artefact that they had chosen, whether that was patterning from a rug, whether it was elements of stitching from a textile that they had chosen, or whether it was a piece of painting on some pottery. But each and every student produced a lovely collection of work on paper at this stage, but some of them had also taken it into fabric, which is lovely. Now, having had a first few sort of formal teaching sessions with me, it was now time for the students to expand their own ideas on design work and take their own aspect of their creative journey in relationship to the artefact and move forward with that. So they may have continued with working with some of the hard patterning on their object and rearrange that intuitively in a way that they would want to, or perhaps it was something a bit more ephemeral, perhaps a bit more spiritual, a bit more subjective that they chose to do in relationship to their artefact. And I have to say, this is the real excitement of this class, is just everybody celebrating their own meaning structure, the way that they view the world, and how then that comes out in their creativity. And you'll see in this exhibition of work that each piece is totally different from the piece that is next to it. And that just has to be celebrated. So enjoy the exhibition and take time to read the artist's statements because they will explain a little bit more about the background to each piece.